Welcome to UO Today. I'm Barbara Altmann, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. We're out of the studio today. In fact, we're sitting in the lobby of the Miller Theater Complex, which houses the Robinson Theater and the New Hope Theater. The complex is about to reopen after an extensive remodel and renovation. John Schmor, head of the Department of Theater Arts, will discuss the project and how we got to this beautiful space. John, thanks for coming.
Thanks for asking me.
Welcome to the show. And I know you know the history of the theater department and of this particular space better than anybody on campus, so allow me to pick your brains.
Okay.
The University Theater as an entity has a long history at U of O, right?
It does, unusual. We might even be older than the Yale drama program. It's hard to say because there weren't departments back then, but we had regularly established classes specifically towards theater production.
As early as?
1899, we're going to be celebrating our 100th year. So
I can't think of a better way to celebrate it than by moving into this beautiful space.
I know, and that was not planned. It only dawned on us that it had coincided.
A very happy coincidence.
Yeah.
But tell me where the theater started on campus. It was not over on this side.
No, it was in the President's Building.
Johnson Hall.
Mm-hmm. And then when Villard Hall was built, they built a multi-purpose auditorium, beautiful space that was the whole second, third floor, big, huge open room. And that's where they were. But they also performed at MacArthur Court. And we have a 1920s photograph of a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream that was on a floating stage in the Mill Pond. So
just across what's now 11th Avenue and Franklin Boulevard?
That's right, with people in their 20s dress up, sitting all along the pond banks. I'm sure the pond was cleaner back then.
One hopes so.
Yeah. And the Very Little Theater originally started in a bicycle shop downtown, and the university students would go and produce plays and work there. So at one point they had a downtown venue that then became the Very Little Theater.
So before we talk about the new Miller Theater Complex, can you talk about how the Robinson itself took shape and who designed it?
The Robinson was designed by Horace Robinson himself, and it was what happened was there was going to be a performing arts center of some sort, and it was planned for the Millrace studio area, where we now have facilities and the art studios.
So just north of this site?
Yeah, kind of over by the Autzen Bridge. The money fell through, war happened, and the only way to get a theater made was to call it a renovation of Villard Hall. So they stuck this brutal modern concrete thing on the front of Villard Hall, which used to have a gigantic porch and a sweeping staircase that came down onto a lawn that went all the way to Dad's Gate.
That explains why that sightline was not so lovely.
No.
In fact, I have to quote a lovely line that you sent us on the history of the Robinson. I believe you called the original Robinson a brute cancer on the face of the prettiest building on campus.
I still believe that. But we would never have had the funding to tear it down and try to put the theater somewhere else. That was just not an option. What I think the new architects, the Hacker and Associates architecture team did was make a better face on the Robinson. When you stand on the sidewalk or out on Franklin, or when you're coming across campus from Lillis, it isn't this kind of imposing, really kind of ugly citadel now. It's got this invitation to it, so.
The invitation, I think, is the terraces that lead up to the new front doors, right? Which will be a great social space as well as a lovely entry into the theater.
Yeah, I hope so. I feel that way. I mean, I feel like you want to come up and see what's here.
So tell us how this came about. How did the Miller Theater Complex come into being?
Well, we had good relations with an alum named Jimmy Miller, James F. Miller, and he passed, I believe, in the 90s, but left a foundation, and the foundation was convinced to offer a matching grant of $1.5 million. We thought at that point, this is how naive we were, that all we needed was $3 million to build a black box theater. That was all we were asking for.
And if I have this right, you ended up spending almost $8 million?
Yeah, closer to 9.
But
But that's construction costs. You know, we can blame it on the Chinese Olympics.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the matching grant. So you raised a 1.5 grant from the Miller Foundation
And
as
we
a
had to,
matching.
I'm sorry, we had to ask for a delay, a deferral, because we couldn't get it matched. So for a long time there, it looked like we weren't going to get it. But we were still having meetings with the architecture team, and they said, tell us everything you need, and we'll go from there. We're not going to start with just the black box. Thank goodness. So we talked about the need for a new costume shop. The old one was in a basement that was unsafe, not ventilated correctly, and cramped. We talked about renovating the Robinson. When construction costs climbed, we had to cut back, and for a long time it looked like all we were going to do is the lobby and the black box, maybe the shops, definitely not the Robinson. And I kept arguing, I can't imagine inviting an audience into this beautiful new lobby and they walk into the Robinson as it was. The Robinson was built in '48 and had only once been cosmetically renovated in 1976, I think.
So you had a 50, 60-year-old
Yeah,
theater.
yeah. I can't imagine a science department dealing with laboratory equipment that's 50 years old.
So you built a wish list of things that you wanted to see happen.
Yes. And as I said, the Miller project did not include the renovation of the Robinson, so we're only talking about the lobby, the black box, and the shops. I can tell you that it was the first year I was department head that I met a lovely person named Dave Patrone, whose wife was interested in helping us, and he was not too sure about this gift, but we had a long talk, and he generously gave to such degree that it jump-started the project. I believe, had that gift not come through, it would never have happened.
So that allowed you to make progress on the matching piece of the funding?
Yeah, and to get the legislature to agree to do the bonds, to get Johnson Hall to agree that, yeah, the project will go forward. I mean, I don't know if people know this, but there are times when projects just wilt.
Yes. And you were clearly in fear that this one would wilt unless you were able to pull in some big
Yes,
gifts.
and thank goodness for Jane Gary and the other people who work for the CAS Development Office who really put me in touch with donors, kept contact, kept updating people. So it happened, but boy, we were holding our breath. And we'd been in a bunker mentality for so long. I think most of us actually didn't really believe it was going to happen anyway. So the day the chain link fence came in was the day I watched my faculty all become 3-year-olds. It was, this is going to happen. John, this is really going to happen.
How wonderful
And
to
it was
be.
like that for a year. I mean, we've all been sort of giddy and ridiculous for this whole construction process.
I know you're about to open your first production, and that must be another giddy moment, but let me back up for just a second.
Sorry, I went afield.
You had a couple of donors who have given generously to other projects on campus. You got an illustrious donor list going, I believe, right?
That's right.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh, the Lillises have been interested. Gwen Lillis actually had a degree in costuming and theater, and so she gave to such a degree that we named the new costume shop for her. Joe Stone, our former CAS dean, was so loved that his board collected money to name the green room after him. And the Knights. Penny Knight donated to the Miller project, but then she was the one who kind of tipped the balance for the second phase, getting the Robinson renovated. But that, I wanted to, can I go back and tell the beginning of that story?
Please do.
The ASUO, our student union organization, had a surplus, and Joseph Gilg noticed it and said, I think this is something we could propose to sort of get a seed grant for the Robinson renovation, because I was just horrified that we were going to do all of this and not change that, that being the Robinson. So, but the thing is that it had to be a student proposal. So Joseph wrangled some students together, helped them write some things. I worked with grads, he worked with undergrads. They went, didn't get anywhere. They asked for $100,000. In the middle of the Senate hearings, somebody said, we're not giving anything to the arts, and we were back on the list. But we literally had less than 24 hours to get the students reorganized to go to the hearing where they're not allowed to speak. So we have these lovely pictures of all of our theater students that went that night with signs. They found a way to break the rule, and they got the $100,000.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah. So then I could write a letter to Penny Knight and say, this is what the students have done. Can you help us get over the hump? And she did. And what I loved was the note that she sent with the check was, get it done.
And I bet
And then as soon as she donated, other people donated. A lot of other people got interested because people like to give to something that they think is going to happen.
Of course. Once you get the ball rolling, everyone is much happier to be a part of it.
Yeah.
I do want to talk to you about the first production that will be opening in the renovated space very shortly. But first of all, can we also back up to some of the significant changes that have been made? For example, can you explain what the Black Box Theater is?
Oh, yes, excuse me. We've named it The Hope, partly because we're hoping for a donor to give it another name. But
is that the case?
Yeah, partly. But also The Hope was the last great Elizabethan theater, and it was a multi-purpose. By Black Box, it literally is a big black square room, so you can arrange seating in any way you want. It's a multi-purpose, flexible theater. You can do arena, you can do thrust, you can do promenade like a fashion show. It's state-of-the-art. It's got a tension grid, which means you can walk out over the space and aim lights through this kind of trampoline mesh, meaning we don't have to put students on ladders or cherry pickers or any other things like that. But you can also angle light in any way that you want. So it improves, as I understand it, I'm not a lighting designer, but it improves your flexibility to light things from 360 degrees around an object.
And that will replace a small, cramped space in Villard Hall that was essentially a revamped classroom.
Yeah, if you want to call it revamped. I mean, it was a better home for cockroaches than it ever was a theater. And it's now an acting studio. We cleared it all up. We got rid of the black paint. We brightened it, and it's a fine classroom. Yeah, for 30, maybe over 30 years, it was used as a theater. We were never allowed to even put in a window air conditioner because it's a historic building. It's Villard Hall. And people loved going to the shows there because it was intimate and close, but we had to store scenery in the hallways. And we had acting classes in there all day long every day, so that meant we could never have a set permanently installed, which meant scene building time had to happen at odd hours or over the weekend.
That explains why the lights were always on at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So this new space is going to be a vast improvement for your graduate students and for other small productions.
Yes, and for our design faculty especially, I think. Their lives have just been updated. You know, I've been saying to some friends that we have new faculty in the department, and we've got this new set of theaters. It's like having a totally new job without having to move.
It's what a luxury, what a privilege.
Right?
For those people who are behind the scenes on your productions, there have also been miraculous changes. The new costume shop, for example, you talked about the old one in the basement, no ventilation, no windows.
Yes.
The new one has a huge bank of windows.
Yeah, the architects really listened to Sandy Bonds and understood, and they looked at that basement and knew what needed to happen. And you know, historically, for some reason, costume shops are routinely put in basements. I think it's a hierarchy thing. You know, we could get into a whole analysis of that, but yeah, it's an artist's studio when you walk into it.
It's a beautiful space. The light that comes through those windows is extraordinary.
Yeah.
So Sandy Bonds and everyone else must also be letting out their inner 3-year-old at the moment.
That's right. That's exactly right. She says every time she goes into the shop, she feels lighter.
The same thing applies to the set building area, right? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, our scene shop was simply the far upstage section of the Robinson stage, which meant that we had to always assemble every set on the stage itself rather than assemble and then move in. And what that means is that you get rehearsal periods where the actors can't be on the stage because the set isn't completed and it's dangerous. And that means you have to move the actors to some alternative space. I mean, it's just... And crowded, cramped. We were never able to store enough materials or keep things clean the way Janet likes to have them so that the shop is, disciplined. They have an expanded shop that opens both ways into the Robinson stage and directly onto the arena stage.
So the same shop serves both theaters?
Yeah, it's kind of an L-shaped arrangement, so it's very flexible. It's got a good flow.
I want to get back to your success in insisting that the Robinson itself, and there are the doors right behind us, also get not just a facelift, but a really serious rearranging of the space.
Right.
Would you describe that?
Sure. The Robinson was, as I understand it, originally designed to have a balcony, and then they had a budget cut. This is the old Robinson, right? So they didn't put the balcony in. So for the 50 years that it had been unchanged, the acoustics were poor and the sightlines were awful. We were always staging our plays as far downstage as possible, because if you go about 5 feet above the proscenium, there's an echo. And people in town have always asked, why do the University of Oregon students always over-enunciate? It was because you're having to play your voice to 3 totally different audience zones. That was how bad it was. So the architects, of course, came up with this amazing acoustic retrofit of the space. We weren't able to raise anywhere near the money that would have taken. But I kept thinking, if we re-rake the house, if we go with that part of the plan, it will change.
Okay, stop and explain re-raking the house.
Sorry, the house is where the people sit, and the rake is the tilt of the seats and the floor, and it was too slight. So if you went to see a play in the old Robinson, you were kind of constantly having to move your head to see between the heads in front of you. What we have now is stadium seating like a contemporary movie theater would be. Quite steep. Everybody's got an absolutely clear view of all points of the stage, and because it rakes so steeply, the volume of air is cut in half, and sound is so much better. The actors that are currently in this play coming up that were in plays before, the old way, report to me that they can actually calibrate. Now they can hear what their sound is doing. But in the old Robinson, it would just go out into this big, dark cavern.
So the re-raking of the seating area of the house made a huge difference to the acoustics?
I think, yeah. It may not be a perfect orchestra hall, but it is 100 times better. I mean, an absolute transformation of the theater.
It's a very dramatic place now. That steep
fun,
rake
right?
on the seats, yes, makes it a scene where it's full of potential and you're waiting to see what happens. It's a lovely.
And the view from the stage is, I'm going to see everybody. Yeah, it's great.
So what's the first production that opens in this lovely space?
Sarah Freeman, one of our new faculty members, is directing a new adaptation of Around the World in 80 Days, which is an adaptation of the novel, not the movie. So there are no hot air balloons, and Frank Sinatra's not in it. But it's eight actors telling the Jules Verne story through a variety of different storytelling and theatrical methods. Puppetry, comedy, farce, energy, adventure, all of that sort of thing going on. Everything's coming out of trunks and everything is moving.
And what are the sets going to be like for that?
From what I understand, the context is Fogg's library. So it's also an homage to the book and the library, in a way.
Excellent. We were saying earlier that the theater arts are really at the heart of the notion of what humanities are as a discipline, and it sounds to me like this production fits right into that concept.
I think that's true, yes.
You have also chosen to go with a tried and true playwright or author for your production in the spring. Could you talk about your Ovid?
It's Mary Zimmerman's adaptation of about 12 of the stories out of the Metamorphoses. And one of them is the familiar Midas story. But there are other stories that may be more unfamiliar to people.
Midas is the king who turns everything to gold, everything he touches.
And loses his daughter. And the play is set in a pool of water. It's just kind of a poem about the poem.
You have to tell me how you're going to set a play in a pool of water.
I don't have to tell you that. In the theater, we have our tricks. No, I don't really know. I mean, we're just in the opening phases of how we're going to do that technically. But of course, it requires a heating system and a lot of calculation in terms of cubic pressure.
Water weighs a lot.
Water weighs a lot, and it wants to get out.
So this is a bold conception for your spring production.
I did it, I proposed it because I wanted to take advantage of the new sight lines in there. This is I wanted the audience to see what we can do with this thing.
So it would never have worked in the old Robinson because
no.
none of the audience would have been able to see the pool.
There was no place in the Robinson Theater where you could see the stage surface back in the old days.
So it's a way to show off your new sight lines and the new technical capabilities of the building.
Yeah.
John, your productions tend to be...
Uh-oh.
I've seen a number.
I know,
of them.
you've been such a good...
Shall we say extravagant, unexpected sometimes?
I like that, yeah.
Gender bending, genre bending.
Yep.
Are you planning any of your what might be hallmark John Schmor principles for the Ovid?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's one of the reasons I'm attracted to it. And one of the things that I want to do with the piece that I find lacking from what Zimmerman has done is that I want to return to the grotesque element in Ovid. There is a violence and an odd hybridity to the storytelling that he does, so we're going to try and do that. But yeah, I mean, 3 gallons of blood for a zombie Hamlet every night last year, so of course I have to do something in a swimming pool.
A swimming pool filled with blood, perhaps.
Right. Yeah, no, I go those ways because I think that one of the key promises that a theater must make to its audience members is that they're going to get surprised. Why else are they there? They're not there unless they want something surprising, right? I think.
I took 4 teenagers to your version of Hamlet, and they were thrilled. They were unbelieving that live theater could be that much fun and that interesting.
And in particular, probably Shakespeare's Hamlet, right?
Yeah, because they've all read it 6 times in high school, but there it was in a way that made sense to them with zombies. So
good.
I'm looking forward to seeing Ovid through your lens. And I really endorse the violent, bloody Ovid because that's what happens to him in the Middle Ages. So why not bring back that side in the 21st century? Before we finish, though, I wanted to bring the discussion back to this gorgeous building, just because here we are out of the studio for once. Can you tell us a little bit more about the architects and some of the challenges?
They were great. One of the challenges was trying to even gauge where the economy was going. With really, construction prices went crazy at a certain point, and it was right at the point where we weren't taking anything in. So they made some cuts based on square footage and things like that. They're very good architect teams, so they're expensive. And what I learned from this process is it pays to hire expensive designers that are good, because every cut they made was an improvement of the original design.
So even scaling back meant further improvements?
That's what I think. The first lobby was bigger than this, and it was a split level. So you came in, they were going to dig out this whole hillside, and you would come in and go up a stairway into. But that would have divided the audience into downstairs, upstairs. And audiences like to hang together.
It would have also posed some interesting accessibility issues.
Right, and it wasted a lot of space, and it looked kind of funny. And so when they realized, well, we could cut a lot of square footage and a lot of expense if we redesigned that lobby, they did this. And this is making use of the old lobby. These pillars are from the original old lobby. These doors were that's the basic space where you would go into the wheelchair handicapped access platform at the back of the house. The space we're sitting in is the old lobby. Remember, there used to be mirrors on the ceiling.
To try to create the illusion of a little more space.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very 70s.
Yes.
So yeah, I watched them solve problems and make things better. It's just amazing.
It sounds as though you had a very good working relationship with the architects, and you also had auditory consultants?
Yeah, Shalek, consultant firm that works with Hacker a lot. Yeah, they were all good.
I wanted to ask you a little more about the lobby space itself, because as a patron of this theater, I remember trying to come buy tickets when people with tickets were already trying to get into the theater. The traffic area was really unworkable. How has that facet of the operation changed?
Oh, greatly. We've more than tripled the size. I would say we've probably quadrupled the size of the original lobby. And the box office down there, we can have a long line, sheltered line, that is in no way blocking people up here or people in the smaller atrium area outside the Hope.
As I recall, too, when you gave us a tour a few weeks ago, there's a lovely corridor that leads to the Hope,
right,
which opens other possibilities for the use of that space, right? What are you intending to do with that new internal space?
I think we've talked about wanting to display artistic renderings from our design faculty and maybe photographs eventually or something like that. But we want to kind of try and, I've been telling the faculty we want to remember that this isn't our space, this is for the next several generations. And it might be nice if we don't immediately place signatures everywhere, you know, that we let things be open and inviting.
But isn't there a huge temptation simply to take it over and make every single square inch of it into the concept you have in mind now?
Sure, but you know that'll happen naturally, so why push it, you know? And we want it to be home for more than just us, so the Oregon Humanities Center is invited to come home here, and we're going to have the dance department putting on a concert on the Robinson stage next year. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, and I want to repeat what you just said, because the people who watch this show should hear it too, that you have graciously invited the Humanities Center to run our public programming in this beautiful space.
Yeah.
So as of fall '09, we'll be holding our lectures here.
Yeah.
I'm delighted.
Well, again, because I want people to start to get the notion again that the theater is central to the humanities, not fringe.
Not fringe, even fringe theater is central to the humanities.
Yes.
All sorts of bad puns. John, is it going to be ready for the Jules Verne production?
Oh yeah.
So it's on schedule?
Oh yeah. The only thing that's going on right now are fixing things that aren't quite particularly working. You know, like little detail finishing things. It's done.
Well, we'll invite people to come and see the Jules Verne for themselves.
Yes, please do.
And we have to close now, but I thank you for being with us. This was terrific.
Great. Thanks for letting me gab.
Anytime. We are sitting in the lobby of the new Miller Theater Complex with John Schmor, Department Head of Theater Arts at the University of Oregon. Thank you all for watching, and see you from the studio next time.